Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here again. So you guys are maybe having me, maybe too much of me in the last day or two, but it's really a pleasure to have you here and enthusiastic to learn about Nature 2.0 and build towards Nature 2.0. So the first thing I want to talk about is seeing if this thing works. Let's see. It does. Wow. Great. So I'm going to start with sort of a pressing concern. In USA, there are 3.5 million truck driver jobs. In perhaps 2 years or 5 years or 10 years max, they'll basically all be gone. Why? Self-driving trucks, right? It makes a lot of sense. It's way more efficient. It saves a lot of money for the operators. But of course, it doesn't make very much, it's not very happy or friendly to the truck drivers themselves. So those 3.5 million truck driver jobs, poof, gone. Due to, well, automation. Not just trucking as well, retail. Amazon Go is a store that Amazon has been pioneering. They're starting to roll them out across dozens of cities where there are literally no employees at the checkout or otherwise. There's 1 or 2 security guards. That's basically it. You walk in, you get your stuff, you walk out. There's literally no checkout. It just knows what it knows you by your face, et cetera, and you just go. They've been beta trialing it for the last couple of years, but yeah, it's scaling up now. In USA alone, there are 4.6 million retail jobs. Where will they go? Poof. Not so happy, right? But you might think, maybe I'm okay because I'm a creative person, right? I studied, I went to university, I do stuff that AI can't possibly automate. Well, think again. This here is an antenna that was designed not by an RF engineer, maybe from NXP, not by an RF engineer that has, say, 4 years of electrical engineering undergrad and another 4 years of PhD. No, it was evolved by an evolutionary algorithm running for a few hours, and it came up with this design, basically a bent paperclip, but it happens to be better than any human-designed antenna in the planet for its application. This was evolved actually in about 2005. After that, a company called X5 Systems, by one of the creators of the algorithm, was formed, and now they've been flying up these antennas into space for many, many years, and it's become a standard part of the design practice for antennas. Myself, I did a PhD in creative AI as well, so I see basically that it's not just antennas. There's application of creative AI in many, many places, and we're starting to see this take off more and more and more. So myself, as an AI researcher, spent many, many years doing that. I've come to the perhaps scary conclusion that AI might not just take away 5% or 10% of the jobs. It might take away 99% of the jobs. And I sometimes think, oh, well, at least the one last thing that might be left is that of AI researcher itself. But actually, I have AI researcher friends who are also automating AI itself, right? So maybe no job is safe. And so this is kind of a concern, not just for blue-collar workers, but also white-collar for the creative jobs and so on. So this leads to a question of, in an age of AI, how do we feed our families, right? And that's sort of addressing the negative, but maybe there's a positive way to frame this, which is AI, it does promise massive efficiency gains, massive improvements in how we get things done, in how we make bread, in how we transport goods, etc. So is there a way to actually use AI to achieve abundance? So flipping it around, rather than just trying to stop the negative, trying to go for the positive, maybe even the extreme positive. What does that look like? Today I'm going to talk to you about a potential vision for this, which of course is Nature 2.0. With that, I'm going to cover sort of 3 parts and then synthesize them. I'm going to talk about good old Nature 1.0. I'm going to talk about AI. I'm going to talk about blockchain. And then I'm going to bring it all together. So let's talk about Nature 1.0. Nature itself doesn't call itself a 1.0, of course. It's just continually evolving. That's a label I gave it. But you need a 1.0 before a 2.0, right? So let's take a tree. This is just simply a tree. And it's there. It takes in nutrients. It takes in rain. It takes in CO2. It takes in sun. And it manufactures wood. It interacts with the environment. It has symbiosis with animals, the squirrels and the chipmunks living on the trees and around the trees. and with the soil below and everything there. And overall, trees, they're kind of interesting. They have no identity. They have no sense of ownership. They have no sense of scarcity, no sense of money. They just are. They're self-sustaining. And a cluster of trees or a forest of trees is anti-fragile. If you kick it, it can be stronger, as long as you don't kick it too hard. And of course, this isn't just a tree. If we have larger and larger ecosystems, ever higher levels of integration, going from the flora and fauna, we get to ecosystems higher and higher. And each ecosystem itself just is. It's self-sustaining and anti-fragile. If you kick it, it gets stronger. And if we keep going up to the very, very largest level, we have Mother Earth, the ecosystem of our whole planet, our whole spaceship. Nature, then, is the cradle of civilization. It's what humanity lives on, the substrate that we rely upon, planet Earth. So that's sort of a framing of Nature 1.0. Let's now talk about some nerdy technology things, AI and blockchain. So AI, there's quite a few ways to frame AI. There's no one single definition. I'm going to talk about a few. If you go back to the 50s, and earlier even, Alan Turing basically framed it as AI replicates human cognitive behavior. And this is best manifested in the Turing test, basically trying to decipher whether the entity talking back and forth to you via text messages is a human or a computer. So, trying to replicate human behavior. But of course, it doesn't have to be just that. There's other ways to frame AI. One of them is, well, doing tasks that only a human could previously do, such as the antenna from NASA. But you can not just be equal, but you can do way better. So in the design of chips, for example, in a given chip, you might have 1 billion or 10 billion transistors. This chip is designed typically by a team of engineers of 10 to 50 engineers over 3 months. So 10 billion parts designed in 3 months by 10 people. How is that possible? Well, under the hood, it is AI tools that are compiling together the specifications from the engineers and making the layouts, et cetera, to be manufactured. So this is not possible if you did it manually. And in fact, a lot of AI tools were developed initially for semiconductor design, such as simulated annealing. So can do a task at a speed or accuracy or capacity, simply not possible by a human. That's another great definition of AI. Keeping going. There we go. A more perhaps mundane but practical definition is AI is simply a set of tools. A set of tools that isn't traditionally covered by traditional numerical computing. Some might say it's even all the things in computer science that are still sufficiently mysteries before being technologies. And these include tools for doing classification, regression, knowledge extraction, optimization, creative design. So classification is simply taking in a vector of inputs, maybe for credit card fraud, what's the salary of someone, what's the age of that person, and then trying to predict whether or not that person has a good chance of paying their bills, such that, should I actually give them a credit card or not? So that's a set of tools. There's, most of the work out there these days, when we hear about AI and deep learning, it's really about classification and regression. But AI itself is so much more than that. Like I mentioned, knowledge extraction or creative design and more. And perhaps the most general idea of AI is artificial general intelligence. And really that comes down to embodied agents. A negative feedback control system where you have these agents running around, getting input from the environment, updating their world model, and based on that world model, actuating the world in new ways. So those are basically a few definitions of AI. I just wanted to give you guys a flavor of kind of what's out there. Now, many of you here probably have background in blockchain, given that we are in a blockchain, and I guess AI hackathon, but I'm going to talk about a few ways to frame blockchain. In the beginning, there was Bitcoin. Now it's actually been live for more than 10 years, which is kind of amazing. Some have framed it as magic internet money, but overall, Bitcoin as e-gold with new characteristics, decentralized, permissionless, et cetera. And so this is a nice starting point, but of course, blockchain is not just Bitcoin. If you want to start with a mundane definition of blockchain, it's simply a linked list, a chain of blocks, where these blocks each hold a set of transactions. And those links are simply hashes. So that's sort of the nerdy computer science definition. You've got replication on this list of 5 copies or 5,000 copies, depending on the network. So that's sort of a definition, but what we can do is abstract to higher and higher and higher levels. So the next level up would be a decentralized database. And in this definition, this picture, does anyone know what this is? Any guesses? Yes, Oracle, exactly. So, and what it also is, though, is the logo for databases. So Larry Ellison does have a sense of humor, a small sense, maybe a big sense, but a sense of humor. It's right by the SFO airport, if you're ever in SFO, so you're driving by in Burlingame and you'll see this. So that's the Oracle databases. Those actually aren't filled with data. That's just the offices for Oracle, so you guys know. But decentralized database. So a blockchain can be framed as a decentralized database, a database that happens to have no single entity that owns or controls it. Keeping going. You can go one level higher and say it's a trust machine. Now, some people might hear the word trust machine and think, okay, I can put anything in and it automatically converts it to truth, truth washing. No, that's not what trust machine means. What trust machine means is it minimizes the trust needed to operate. So you can have 1,000 entities running 1,000 nodes, and if a few of them start to act badly, that's okay, it doesn't take down the whole system. You can have a pretty large fraction of them acting badly and you're still okay. That's what trust means. So it's about trust minimization. And this leads to social scalability, as Nick Szabo talks about. So keeping going even higher and higher levels, we can go to DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And this is a way of framing where you have this computational process that's running, but it's running autonomously on decentralized infrastructure, such as, say, Ethereum, and it has resource manipulation. It's got its own wallet, et cetera. So a simple way of framing that is it's code that can own stuff. And that's quite remarkable. This is kind of the first time we've had this in human history. Or a simple way to, another framing is it's a good computer virus. So, most computer viruses out there run around and they're kind of acting badly or doing negative things, but, can we have computer viruses that kind of self-replicate and copy, but do good things or add a service to society? So that's quite a few definitions of blockchain to help set the stage here, and of AI. I still haven't figured out where to point this thing. Let's see here. Here we go. I'll point it there. Now, of course, I'm going to do, some people might say, oh, that's buzzword bingo, mashing these things together. But, I've spent a long time in the world of AI, about 20 years, and the last 5 years in blockchain, long before either of those were cool. And so, I've been in and out of AI winters. We're now in the middle of a crypto bear market, and we keep building. So I encourage you, we're all here. Building. So anyway, when you merge together AI and blockchain, one thing that you can end up with is what I call AI DAOs, artificial intelligent decentralized autonomous organizations, AI DAOs. So what are they? Well, I'm going to start with an example, the art DAO. So imagine the following. We've got an AI running on a blockchain. What is that? It's just a very, very simple script that can actually create art, generate images. For example, this image on the right was evolved using genetic programming. So there's lots of ways for AIs to create art. You can use deep dreams, lots of ways. So you've got this AI running in a blockchain. It generates a new image, that's step 2. And now what it does is it takes this image and it sells it on a marketplace, say OpenBazaar, a decentralized marketplace. Someone buys it. And maybe it spent 10 cents worth of computation to initially create that image, and it sells it for $1. So it just made 10x. With that, what does it do? It makes 10 more images, and it sells all 10 of them, and then it gets $100, and it keeps repeating and repeating. $100, then it has 1,000, and then 10,000, and maybe eventually it'll have $1 million, and it'll own it itself. We'll have the world's first AI millionaire, and it's super stupid. It really doesn't know anything except for generating art. This could happen. In fact, I hope it does. And actually, with these AI DAO architectures, there's quite a few ways you can approach it. You can have sort of an AI at the center, which is kind of what I described. It's just generating these images, for example. And then around the edges, you have people interacting with the network. And by the way, there is a project now called Artonomous that has been driven by Simon de Rouvier. He was also a co-originator of this idea of AI DAO with myself. And basically, Artonomous is getting built, which is an art DAO getting built. So anyway, going back to the architectures, we can have the AI at the center, the smart contract, or we can have a very, very stupid smart contract at the center, and then have AI at the edges. So imagine something like the DAO that we had a couple years ago, which was basically the sort of clearinghouse of investment, and there's human investors around it. But imagine if all the investors around it were robots, right? That would be also a way to get at an AI DAO. And this isn't that unlike ad exchanges, right? We have ad exchanges that are running. They're basically clearinghouses. And the people buying and selling ads aren't actually people. It's robots that are herded by people, but it's really robots. So we can have that as well. Finally, we can actually go a bit more general and just say, you know what? We have just a whole bunch of super stupid AI agents running around on Ethereum or whatever, and they're all interacting with each other according to whatever rules. And this is kind of like ant colony optimization or swarm intelligence in general. So in ant colony optimization, you can have 10,000 ants, and each ant, all that it knows is that it's trying to walk forward, and if it's trying to choose whether to go left or right, it has a slightly higher chance of going left if there's a little bit of basically ant poop that's left behind there from previous ants. And basically, over time, what that does is it will actually come up with the optimal routing to go from point A to point B. So that's an example of a very, very simple mechanic that actually can lead to optimal designs in some cases. So that's what the third architecture is about, basically emergent AI DAOs. So once again, there's quite a few ways to have these AI DAOs architectures. They're quite simple. They can be built in a matter of just 10, 50, 100 lines of code sometimes. So with these AI DAOs, what does this lead us to? Well, one thing that's kind of fun is you might ask, when will AIs get rights? And this has been a long-standing debate. Well, there's a funny thing, and the core idea is that corporations are people too, right? They were invented, hundreds of years ago here in the Netherlands, and they have rights, they have liability, and so on. So the core idea is that you start a corporation, and then you automate that corporation into an AI DAO where you basically remove the people. And you can do this in Zug, Switzerland, where you can actually remove the people. This is actually what the DAO did. You can do it in Malta, where the law is there, now allow basically corporations without people attached. And other jurisdictions are doing this as well. I just heard Wyoming has it set up now where an Ethereum address or a blockchain address in general can own a corporation. So it's kind of amazing. So all you need to do is take a corporation and automate it into an AI DAO. And you know what? Guess what? You're done. It's an AI, and it has rights. Straightforward. I'm waiting for someone to do that, by the way, so maybe that's a hackathon challenge for one of you guys, and the world's first AI with actual rights. So let's take all of these things together. I've talked about Nature 1.0. I've talked about AI. I've talked about blockchain. What happens if we start saying, let's merge these together towards this overall goal? Remember at the beginning, how do we not only address the potential woes of AI taking jobs, but rather lead towards a future of abundance, where we can not only feed our families, but perhaps even self-actualize. AI DAOs is basically Nature 2.0 to the moon. So imagine if we have a self-driving car, but it's not just self-driving. Imagine if it owns itself. So this car gets manufactured, and maybe Daimler manufactures it, or Audi. And this car, Audi creates a corporation for this car, and this car runs on the Uber network, and over time, the car buys itself back via the lease, buys itself back from Daimler or Audi. And after 2 years, it's paid itself off, and then after that, it's just a surplus, and it keeps going along. So you've got a self-driving, self-owning car. Every single car out there that's self-driving, self-owning could be its own corporation. So this is possible, actually, with essentially today's technology. It's quite remarkable. It seems completely sci-fi, right? Almost unimaginable, yet it's actually possible. And of course, that's very nicely in line with the theme, right, of become a part of the unimaginable but buildable. That's exactly what we have here. But of course, we don't have to stop at the self-driving, self-owning cars. We can also have self-driving, self-owning trucks. We can have self-owning roads, right? So the roads can be owned by themselves. We can have self-owning wind farms. We can have self-owning power grids. We can even have self-owning forests. And in fact, this is actually a project being pursued by some folks in Berlin and going under the project called Terra Zero. They've also done some very cool flower tokens on the side, but imagine a forest that owns itself, where it isn't subject to the whims of humans that might stop caring, but instead it has a long-term time frame of hundreds or thousands of years where it's buying and selling as it needs. It has its own contracts related to logging where things get logged appropriately, and then it uses that to help buy resources for itself over time. So you can have time scales that are much greater than a single human time scale. So self-owning forests. And with this, of course, we can start at the lowest levels, things like the cars, but then go to ever higher levels of integration, right? From beast ecosystems, cars to roads to power grids to whole swarms. And of course, these all can be connected in the internet via IoT devices, machine to machine, and so on, right? And if you think about a car that's self-driving, self-owning, it doesn't really have a sense of identity. It doesn't have a sense of ownership. It doesn't have a sense of scarcity or money. It just is. It's self-sustaining, and even perhaps a little bit anti-fragile. And we can go to the higher levels too. The swarms, higher in the ecosystem, once again. No identity, ownership, scarcity, or money. It just is. And you might ask, how does this relate to the concept of us humans losing all of our jobs, right? Well, imagine with every single one of these cars that is self-owning and self-driving, after it's paid for itself after 2 years, what if it fed all of its surplus into a UBI chain, Universal Basic Income? And that UBI chain was across all jurisdictions of the planet. It wasn't restricted by nation. It was just there. And it's just a very, very simple, stupid smart contract running on Ethereum. For every dollar that goes in, if there's 100 people registered, each person gets a cent, right? So it's just a pass-through. So blockchain actually makes distribution very easy. And then the only question is, how do you get income coming to this? And an answer to this is, well, all the surplus generated by the AIs, where it's, for every job taken away by a self-driving truck, all the surplus from that truck goes into this UBI chain. And of course, this is for the cars, this is for the roads, this is for the power grids, and so on and so forth. And of course, at the very, very beginning, each person that's registered as a sort of unique human in this thing might only get $1 a month. And you might think, yeah, well, that doesn't affect me. Maybe it doesn't affect you, but it can sure make a difference to a kid in rural Canada, or especially a kid in rural Africa, right? $1 a month can make a huge difference. And over time, as the level rises, as more and more income comes from more and more of these self-owning, self-driving entities, this can feed into this larger and larger chain. And you might ask, well, when do we stop? When do we know we have basic income? And my answer is, why stop at basic? Why stop at barely getting by? Let's move up Maslow's hierarchy from basic income of food, clothing, shelter, water, all the way up to healthcare and education, all the way up to self-actualization, equalizing the opportunity for every human on the planet to self-actualize. So equal opportunities, it might be unequal outcomes, right? Some people work harder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's how life is. But at least we can level the playing field, equalize the opportunity. And the path to this can be with this vision of Nature 2.0, where we actually take advantage of the AI to lead us into an age of abundance. This is Nature 2.0, biology and machines in symbiosis, simply providing towards abundance. I see it as an upgrade to the cradle of civilization. So let's move towards concluding. On the internet, no one knows you're a dog. You probably heard this a long time ago. Of course, in the crypto internet, no one knows you're a Doge. By the way, this poor Doge died last year, so R.I.P. Shiba. Well, in Nature 2.0, no one knows you're a forest. In Nature 2.0, no one knows you're a grid. You just are, while you simply provide. Nature is the cradle of civilization. Nature 1.0 is seeds and soil. Nature 2.0 adds silicon and steel with AI and blockchain towards abundance. Thank you.